Joining us now from the White House is Chip Reid. Chip, good afternoon to you. So let's get to the climate deal in just a minute. But first, let's talk about FBI Director James Comey. Has the White House reacted to him testifying? And is there any indication that the president himself may exercise his executive privilege to block that testimony?
There is no indication at this point that he would do that. You never know with President Trump what he might do. And it's been pretty much radio silence about this. I certainly don't think it's something they're looking forward to, but they are hoping that Mr. Comey doesn't add anything to it that we don't already know. But we really are not getting much out of them at this point. I think they're trying to figure out how they should respond.
And so, Chip, there's an open hearing and then there's a closed one. What can we expect former FBI Director Comey to really say in each of these sessions?
Well, in the open session, certainly he's going to go through those contemporaneous notes that he made after meeting with President Trump, which sources have told us that in those notes he said that the president tried to get him to back off his investigation of the Russia matter and the Michael Flynn investigation. The closed session will go more into the investigation itself, probably. We can't be sure since those things certainly are closed. And yeah, there's some leaking that comes out of them afterward, but we really won't know much about it until after that happens.
And Chip, at the same time, President is tweeting about the unmasking of officials today after the House Intelligence Committee sent out subpoenas related to the issue. Has the president been told not to weigh in at this point?
Well, who would tell him that? There's just nobody here who can really tell him what to do. A lot of people have told him to stop these tweets, especially the really controversial ones that take him off message for an entire day or week or more at a time. There are arguments to be made that he shouldn't tweet at all. But the president has said, hey, I wouldn't have been elected if I hadn't tweeted, so stop telling me what to do.
Yeah, there are some people who truly love those tweets that are part of his base. I want to ask you about the big news expected out today, whether the president's going to stick with the climate change agreement. What are you hearing, Chip?
Well, we really don't know. We have, as you mentioned earlier, we have heard from close confidants of the president in the last few days that he is planning to get out of the Paris Accord. But let's keep in mind, this president is impossible to predict. In April, he said, or aides told us, that he was going to withdraw from NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement, and at the last minute, he decided he wanted to renegotiate it. We've heard here he wants to get out of the Paris Accord, but who knows what he's really going to do. The way I see it, there are at least 4 options. Number 1, pull out of the Paris Accord, which would be a pretty dramatic step. Number 2, pull out of the entire climate change agreement from the early 1990s, which would be a much more radical step. He could declare that it's not just an agreement, it's a treaty, and under the Constitution has to be approved by the Senate, which would almost surely kill it because there aren't the votes in the Senate to get 2/3 to ratify it as a treaty. And the fourth thing he could do is, we have been told that he has talked to his staff about, quote, renegotiating the Paris Accord. And what we think that probably means is lowering the targets, weakening the targets that the United States agreed to on greenhouse gas emissions. Perhaps he'll do that, which would be certainly less dramatic than withdrawing from the Paris Accord and would please environmentalists somewhat. But at this point, it's your guess if it's one of those 4 options or something else that we haven't even thought of. Rena and Erica?
That's a good point, Chip. Now, the president just yesterday said he was hearing from people on both sides of the issue. Who are those last-minute appeals coming from?
Well, a lot of corporate executives are weighing in. Most corporate executives favor the Paris Accord. They believe that it's good for business. They believe that it sets the United States in a direction where it can be part of this future energy business, the clean energy business. If the United States backs off from that, then China has a free path to be the dominant power in the clean energy business. So he's hearing from a lot of executives. He's hearing from Rex Tillerson, former head of Exxon and now Secretary of State, who wants to stay in it. Ivanka Trump, his daughter, wants him to stay in the agreement. And then on the other side, you've got the head of the EPA, and you've got Steve Bannon, his chief strategist, who have been working very hard to try to get him to get out of the agreement. So who knows how this is going to come out. You've also got, of course, a lot of international leaders, the ones he met at the G7 conference in Europe recently, who very badly want the United States to stay in it. They think it will be disastrous for the environment and for the economy if the United States pulls out of this. us. So he's getting hit from all sides. But one of the real powerful voices in this are the Republican senators and members of the House who represent districts and states in the Midwest and other areas where the president got the votes in the presidential election, and where there are a lot of coal miners and a lot of other people who believe that their lives will be better off if they get out of this agreement. And I think he's weighing that very seriously. And also keep in mind, he promised during the campaign that he would get out of the Paris Accord, and he's broken a lot of promises. So he probably feels compelled at some point to stick with some of those promises, perhaps this one.
You know, Chip, the reason why President Obama, he did this through executive agreement instead of sending it to the Senate, because he knew he didn't have the votes. Why not have the president just send it over to the Senate? He knows it'll get killed there. Why is he choosing to weigh in like this? Well,
we don't know. He may send it over to the Senate. That is one of the options he could do. We have not heard that from any aides that that's something that he's going to do. But it would look kind of the easy way out, I think, to put the onus on somebody else rather than on himself.
Yeah. We're watching to see this come down at 3 o'clock today. Our Chip Reid there at the White House. Chip, you talk about the global stage. We've already heard China weighing in, saying that they're going to step in if the U.S. doesn't, and India already. We've heard also from the energy minister today saying that they're going to continue on. What does this mean, separate from climate change and energy? What does this mean about U.S. involvement on the global stage if the White House pulls out?
There are a lot of people who believe that what this does is, Donald Trump talks about America first, but a lot of people say it's really America last because we're pulling ourselves out of a leadership position. We're not taking the lead on the whole future energy business, on clean energy. And whatever you say about coal today, we are heading toward a clean energy era ahead, and with possibly nuclear and certainly solar and wind and natural gas rather than coal and oil, and that's simply the direction the economy is going. That's not being pushed by governments. That's being pushed by the private sector in this country, and we could get left behind, is what a lot of people within industry are saying, and a lot of foreign leaders are saying. But you also have to keep in mind that if the United States does pull out of this, other countries will say, well, why should we work so hard to meet these limits that we've agreed to, especially developing countries that are just coming into their own, places like the Philippines and Malaysia and Indonesia. Those countries might decide, well, if they're not going to stick by their agreement, then maybe we'll back off a little, and maybe some countries will even pull out of it, follow the United States in pulling out. And that could be damaging both diplomatically to the United States and economically to the United States and the world.
Chip Reid coming to us from the White House. Thank you, Chip.
You bet.